Good afternoon and welcome to AIADA's AutoTalk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. Just a quick note that anyone who has registered for today's program will be receiving a copy by the end of this week. And if you have any questions, be sure to enter them into the Q&A bar at the lower right-hand side of your interface. Now, please join me in welcoming StrategicSource founder and chairman, Doug Austin. Doug, I read a news item last week that I wanted to highlight really quickly before you go on. It seems that StrategicSource has reached an incredible milestone, helping clients save over $1 billion on indirect expenses over the past 25 years. That is such an accomplishment. Congratulations to StrategicSource. And with that, I will let you take it away, Doug.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Yeah, we did achieve that milestone by the end of 24. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. For those of you who don't know, StrategicSource, we really act as a purchasing department for our clients. We try to understand spend. Once we understand spend and suppliers, then we go in and grab invoices to better understand pricing. And that's how we achieved that number over the years. What I'm going to talk about today is really based on a lot of that work that we do. We're gonna focus on a little bit of background for dealerships so that you understand, excuse me, the landscape. But then we're going to try to zero in on at least 20 categories that can help reduce costs and improve profits. And we know that right now, that's top of mind and uncertainty that dealerships are experiencing. So what we'll cover today is some of the challenges, some of the opportunities to reduce costs other than the expense categories. We'll talk about 20 of the best ideas, some of the results you can expect, and then wrap it up. Most dealerships are leaving 25% on the table. That is, given our experience over 25 years, we know that that's the case. They're spending 25% too much on services and supplies. We know they're losing cash discounts with suppliers. Most dealers have way too many suppliers, which drives increased efficiencies. We know that there are overpayments made to suppliers, and we know that because we audit suppliers on the back end. And finally, there's just too many employees with purchasing authority, meaning folks in the organization have the ability to bring new suppliers on, and it dilutes the value that's going to the current suppliers and just creates a lot of inefficiencies. So some of the management challenges, constant price increases, we've seen that over the past 3 years. There's really no time to overhaul the purchasing or spend function. Dealerships are afraid to disrupt the operation with change. There's stress, and really dealerships are unsure where to start. So what we'll be talking about today is trying to give you some concrete ideas to attack expenses. One of the things that we've learned over the years is that we know that there's an 8-step sourcing process. We know that we need to define requirements, source and qualify suppliers, develop a quote, then renegotiate with those suppliers when we get close, select them, recommend to the management team. We need to implement the solution and manage the supplier and audit. What we find with dealerships is they bypass virtually 7 steps and go right to renegotiation. And the problem with that is if you don't have data sets, if you don't have benchmarks, you end up overpaying. And that's really why dealers are overpaying by 25%. You have to have some current market benchmarks to know what truth is. This slide is intended to just show that typically there's about 100 expense categories that dealerships spend money in. If they each have 10 suppliers in every one of those categories, you can see that 100 categories can lead to 1,000 suppliers, and that leads to 12,000 annual invoices. It's pretty darn inefficient. and results in higher costs and lower profitability. So we want to talk about going from paying too much, missed supplier discounts, too many suppliers, lack of controls and poor profits, to reducing our costs, new discounts, more leverage, more controls, and increased profitability. Dealership facts that you should know. Every dealership is different, but in our experience, there are about 130, 140 expense categories out there. Dealers typically spend in about 100 routinely. We know that they spend about 5% of sales. So if you're a $100 million dealership, you're typically going to spend 5% of that, or $5 million, on services and supplies. We know that dealers will have a minimum of four to one in terms of supplier ratio. So 100 categories will equal 400 um, suppliers. But we've seen a big national group too, a mega group, that had 200 suppliers for every expense category. It's just too large, too costly, and too inefficient. The cost reduction opportunity is 25%. There's a group out there called the Aberdeen Group that wrote on this about 10 years ago and said that if you put a purchasing department in your operation, you'll save about 25%. In our experience, we have never been lower than 21%, which was right after the 2008 meltdown. And most recently, our results are 33%. So the research is right. Purchasing departments certainly earn their keep by bringing value. We know that only 5% of the dealership groups in the country have a purchasing department, meaning 95% are decentralized and have that opportunity of 25% cost savings. So let's talk a little bit about category scope. Every business out there, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, spend money in these 72 categories. These are the general categories, from advertising to check processing to uniforms and laundry and telecom and so forth. So there's at least 72 that everybody will spend money on. If you're an auto dealer, you've got another 16 categories that are facility related, from carpet cleaning to elevator maintenance to window washing. And again, if you're an auto dealer, you've got another 56 categories that are unique to auto dealerships, from auto parts to credit bureaus to locksmiths to utilities and waste, hazardous oil. So it's not hard to imagine that your scope of responsibility, where you're spending money, is at least 100 categories and likely more than that. So this is something you need to get your arms around, or you're going to continue letting dollars fly out the window. This slide is really intended to show you that um, spend strategies, purchasing strategies, can really amount to pretty significant offsets to sales. So if most dealers are operating in a 3% margin, if we can achieve $2 million in cost reductions, if you're a 3% dealer, that's the same as generating 66 million in sales. Or $100,000 in cost reduction, if you're a 3% dealer, is the same as selling $3.3 million in new vehicles. So you can't save your way to profitability only. You have to sell vehicles and parts and service. But the slide is intended to show you that we can make a pretty significant profit contribution by focusing on cost reductions quickly, and it goes straight to the bottom line. There are really 5 ways that you can help with your profitability in a dealership. One is just quoting and benchmarking. the 100 plus categories. Two is get some payment strategies in place to get that 1.5 to 2% discount. Three is to do some compliance audits so we can get some recovery back from dealers that we, or from vendors that we overpay. Four, negotiating with suppliers once we've got some competitive benchmarks. And number five, let's reduce that supplier base so that we can improve our leverage and drive efficiencies. If we do those five things, we're going to bring that 25% plus to the bottom line. So how do we quote and reduce our costs with suppliers? Well, this is an example of an analysis, a live analysis that we did with a multi-store group. They had Subaru, Chrysler, Toyota, Fiat, BMW, Chevrolet stores. We took a look at credit bureaus here, and we knew what our current costs were. We went out to quote. We had actually four quotes in this example, but space doesn't allow me to show that all. But you can see here that we were able to take costs down by 16% to 11% just through the quoting process. So quoting helps provide truth in the marketplace. So some of the categories that you might want to think about going after first, and I'm actually going to cover some of these in just a few minutes: credit card, credit bureau, bank financing, your floor plan, DMS category, and insurance. All of those tend to generate some pretty good results, and we'll cover that in more detail in a minute. Building a request for quote, oftentimes we'll go out to a supplier and we'll ask them for a usage report. Every one of the suppliers that you do business with has an electronic record of everything they've sold you. They can give you a usage report that looks like this, and you can turn it into an RFQ that looks like this. Shoot that RFQ out to suppliers, ask them to quote the items that you buy, and you're well on your way to acting as a purchasing department would. It's a little bit of work, but the benefit is 25% of what you're spending, and that usually amounts to some pretty compelling dollars. So now we're going to get into, I'm going to cover 20 categories with you, and I want you to think about the frequency that we did these, and that's the analyses. over over the previous 12 months, we've looked at this category 141 times, credit card processing. When you look at not only first year, but multi-year savings that we were able to lock in, and that you should be able to lock in, it was worth $199 million. If we look at average savings per client was 266,000, and the savings percent was 74. This is remarkable. This is indicative of a very changing, very competitive marketplace. There are a couple of things going on in credit card processing. There is the traditional credit card processing where you're paying a fee on every transaction, and there is an alternative solution where you pass those fees back to the client, the pass-through rates. So this is probably one of the largest ones that we worked on last year, but we worked on it 141 times. Pretty compelling, and I'd suggest that you take a look at that. Number two is property tax reduction. Most every dealer owns their own property out here and paying property taxes. We know that cities and municipalities, it happened in my own building that I bought. Taxes went up about 20% last year. So I'm sure, and I don't have anything that approximates what a dealership has, but we did this analysis 50 times with a partner. We found $6.2 million in savings. The average savings about 19,000 or 5%. This is something where you can bring in a third party, pay a flat fee, pay a contingency. You can use us in cases where we're engaged, but this property tax offers another opportunity that maybe you haven't thought of in the past. Number three, printed products. Well, what the heck is that? It's really tags, labels, stickers, folders, anything with ink on paper that you use in a dealership. We know there's about 400 to 450 different items that dealers buy. There's some examples here on the bottom, but we pulled in $8.1 million just on printed products, an average savings of what, almost $21,000. And there's about a 25% savings there. What is that telling us? Well, it's a pretty competitive marketplace out there. There's a lot of people that can print products for you, um, but it's a complex category as well because a lot of these items have your name on it. So it becomes a custom print, custom manufacturing capability. When you think of your stationery and your letterhead, and then forms that you need to produce. Some of it can get complex, but there are definitely dollars out there, and dealers have been overpaying by 25% here. Number four, small package transportation. So what we're talking about here is not only FedEx and UPS, but also the resellers that represent those carriers. Every year there's a tariff increase, prices go up. We did this analysis 105 times in the previous period, generated 21 million in savings again, the life of the agreement, with an average savings of $36,000, again, a 25% savings. Everybody is using these carriers. It seems like the parts department are partial to UPS, and the front office is partial to FedEx. But there are resellers who use exactly the same carriers, but at a lesser price. And the reason that they can do that is that it may not be effective for FedEx or UPS to send a sales rep out to your dealership. It's costly to do that. And resellers are given discounted tariff rates to be that salesperson and to represent your account. So this is a real good one to consider. Um, if you're doing a lot of parts wholesaling, chances are your UPS costs are pretty significant, and this is a good one to attack. Shop supplies. Every dealership has shop supplies. There's a couple ways to approach this. You can do a customer managed inventory, meaning you count the items, you place the orders for the restocking, or there's a vendor managed. Vendor managed is quite convenient, but it typically has got a premium of, I don't know, 10 to 15% in terms of price, because the vendor comes in and checks your stocking situation, and then they place the reorders for you. Most of the suppliers, I would say, are pretty honest and trustworthy, some less so. And when sales are slow, they tend to fill up your bins. I'd encourage you to walk your shop, take a look at your shop supplies, run your finger over some of the product in the bin. If you have dust on your finger, chances are you've been oversupplied. So walk around, take a look at it. There's a simple thing you can do, create kind of a min-max. You can take a black magic marker inside those bins and draw a little horizontal line and tell your vendors, I never want it fuller than anything above this line. And it's a simple min-max strategy. But shop supplies in this case threw off 27% savings. Again, we looked at that 86 times. Purchasing a reward card. Well, what do I mean by that? Paying your suppliers with a credit card, with a credit card only used for suppliers, is a very effective way to bring cash back to your organization. We did this 15 times last year. It threw off $2.8 million or 36,000, almost 37,000 in savings. A lot of dealers will have their accounts payable team use a Amex or a Visa or a MasterCard, and they collect points, and points are nice. I do the same. But if you can get cash back of 1.5 to 2% on your spend, that's more valuable than points. And in these cases, we were able to redirect those benefits, those rewards, if you will, to dollars versus points, and it throws off some pretty good cash. Managed print services. What I mean by this is really the printers, the large copiers that you have around your dealership, as well as desktop printers. Um, Anything where you're putting ink on paper internally, if we can aggregate some of those print functions and get the more expensive printers off the desks of your employees, that's going to reduce cost. In this case, 22%. It's not a huge savings, $7,800, $7,900, but it drives more efficiency, and the cost of ink for desktop printers is going up. I experience it, for our employees that are home office, and I'm sure you are too. So aggregating, centralizing print capabilities is another strategy to keep your costs down and increase your profitability. Credit bureaus. Every dealership does credit bureaus. There are a number of strategies here. We did this one 30 or 174 times. We threw off 31 million in potential savings, $34,000 average, or a 30% average cost savings. You can go direct to the bureaus, as most of you know, and there are some resellers out there as well. I won't name them, but who can be very competitive. That's one aspect, is paying a lesser price for the bureaus that you use. The other strategy is don't pull so many doggone bureaus. We find that the dealerships that are in a hurry or get lazy pull 4 bureaus at once. They rack up 10, 12, $13 every time they pull a bureau, instead of a kind of a sequential approach. Pull your first bureau first. If that doesn't yield the score that you want, then pull your second bureau. If that yields the result you want, then stop. So there's potential here for soft cost savings for a process adjustment, as well as buying the bureaus at a lesser cost. And a 30% savings on credit bureaus is pretty compelling. Dealer management systems, you all have these. Most of you, there's a lot of new entrants into this market that's making a lot of noise and making some big improvements. We did this 26 times last year, threw off about 22% or almost $55,000 in savings. I would encourage you, if your contract is coming up with your DMS provider, shop around, because the marketplace has changed dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years. And there are some good opportunities down there to cut costs pretty significantly. Number 10, debt and treasury optimization. 2 years ago, we didn't even do this category. We ran into a former client of ours. He was a client at 2 different times, and who's now in the consulting space, and helped us understand all the debt all the treasury products that dealers use and are paying a pretty penny for. We, with his help, and we're not experts in everything, analyzed this 55 times last year and found almost 400 million in opportunities. And the central theme here is trying to aggregate debt under fewer lending institutions and at lesser cost. Average savings here almost $1 million a year. So take a look at your floor plan, your lenders. I'm sure you have multiple lenders, but this is a big opportunity, and see where you can potentially aggregate that opportunity and refinance. Number 11, vehicle history reports, 72 times last year, threw off 41%. You know, and I know there's one big name out there. They're pretty cocky about who they are. They're good, but there are competitors as well. And those competitors can be deployed in different strategies. Competitors can be used through auctions only. They can be used on the used car lot. They can be used for new cars as well. They are highly effective. They just don't do as much advertising as the big name in town. But we were thrown off. We did this 72 times, threw off about almost $44,000 in savings, or 41%. So, you know, the analogy I would give you, if you need to blow your nose, do you really need a Kleenex or do you need a tissue? And functionally, the competition is pretty darn close out there, and a lot of dealers, some big groups, have made the change and are just offering their clients a tissue rather than a Kleenex. Office supplies, 101 times we did this last year. Everybody uses office supplies. You're probably buying 450 different items across your office supply category. You can use branded items or you can use unbranded items. Most of the time, the unbranded will work just fine. In print cartridges, some people have had luck with unbranded, some haven't. So it can be selective here. But the thing that you want to avoid is leaving a catalog on your desk so that your employees can go shopping. Amazon can offer some pretty inexpensive products, but you need to be really careful because they do just what other office supply companies, they have lost leaders, and you may get a couple items pretty inexpensive and you may pay through the nose on everything else. So it pays to shop. Again, 34% savings, 22,000. You know, what does that mean? Well, that's almost 2,000 a month in bottom line net profit. You start stacking this up with other categories and it can be pretty compelling savings over time. Number 13, accounts payable automation. You know, I would encourage you folks that are looking at automating accounts payable, don't do it. And I know that's kind of heretical, but what I'm suggesting instead is before you automate accounts payable, get your supply base down to a reasonable number. If you're spending in 100 expense categories, you shouldn't have any more than 300 suppliers that you're paying. But if you jump right into automation right away and you've got more suppliers than you need, you're really uh, not leveraging your time very well. You're complicating the simple. So we did this 13 times last year, threw off about $35,000 in cost savings. It's all new savings, savings that didn't exist before. But think about your automation activities before you try to automate something. Get the process fixed, get it under control, get that supply base optimized before you try to automate it. IT support. Most dealers have, well, every dealer has an IT department. A lot of them will outsource chunks of that to qualified and capable support staff. We only did this one 8 times. We threw off 18%, almost $30,000 in savings. So again, it proves the old adage that um, I like to say from President Reagan, trust but verify. You may trust your supplier, and that's a great thing, but go out and shop it every once in a while on an apples to apples basis, and throw off 29,000 in savings. That's pretty good cost savings. Hazardous waste. Most dealers are dealing with this. We did that 49 times, threw off 53%, about $8,200. It's not a significant cost savings, but the fact that we achieved 53% shows that the market is pretty darn competitive, and dealers aren't paying attention to this category. So take a look at that one and shop it and bring some more dollars to your bottom line. Not only shop it, but lock those rates in every category I'm talking about. Try to lock those rates for 12, 24, or 36 months. So that one, you don't have to go back and do it again for a while, but two, that you can trust that those rates that you negotiated will be with you long term. Number 16, waste and recycling. Every dealer has that. We did that 73 times, threw off 21%. Again, the city and county fees are not going to be negotiable, but the waste services are. We generated $3.5 million here in multi-year savings, or about $9,100 per client. Mats and carpets. This is kind of an interesting one. We all know the uniform space, and we know what some of the challenges are there. This is an idea that we've been using now for about 10 or more years, but you can disconnect some parts of your uniform program, in this case, rugs and mats and things like that. You can disconnect that from your uniform program, take them out, don't lease them, but buy them, and buy them and own them outright. We did this 72 times. We generated 56% savings, about almost $11,000 a year, and it's going to reduce your uniform bill. Then your question is, well, how do we clean them? Well, you've got janitorial services in there today. Have them vacuum them, and maybe once or twice a year have them cleaned. But it's a far more efficient and effective to own your own mats than to lease or rent them. Now we get into the uniform program itself, where the mats, carpets typically are. We did this one 107 times, threw off 26%, almost 20 million in savings, 33,000 per dealership. Why is that? Well, there's been a lot of consolidation in the uniform space, where a few years ago we had 4 or 5 suppliers. Today we have 2 or 3 national players, and when the consolidation occurs, the prices go up. So you've got to get smarter here than the suppliers. Get in, strip out items that are costly. You can go to disposable shop towels instead of renting shop towels. There's a number of strategies you can employ here, but again, dealers are overpaying by 26%. It's another one you should take a look at. Specialty flush kits. This is a top line revenue generator, but it's also an expense. We did this 12 times, threw off about 18% opportunity, or 25,000. This is the price you're paying for the products that you sell in the service bay. Additives, fuel and oil additives and things of that sort. Be careful with this one, because the suppliers tend to offer a lot of incentives, should I say, to employees directly that sometimes the dealers don't know about. So that's where a high degree of loyalty comes from on your floor. If you're okay with that, great. But let me just share that this is a competitive category, and you know that this is very incentive driven, and that the suppliers tend to develop relationships with your service drive personnel that you may or may not be aware of. The last one we'll talk about is a simple one: marketing services online chat. We did this 18 times last year. The percent savings wasn't that great, 9%, but the expenditures by dealers is pretty significant. So for that reason, we threw off about 45,000 in annual average savings. So most every dealer is employing online chat in some form or fashion, and this is another one you want to take a look at because there's opportunities out there. So those are the 20. Those are 20 ideas that we have pursued over the past period of time, 12 months going backwards, and that generates some real ideas for you. I think the overall message is that there are not many categories where you're going to strike out. Almost every category offers opportunities for cost savings if you pay attention and are willing to put some time into it. So this chart just shows, based on your supplier spend of 10, 5, 3, 2 million, and I'm using a conservative estimate here, 20% estimate, rather than the 25 that research talks about, or the 33 that we actually achieved. But if you pull out just 20%, you're looking at 400,000, 600,000, and so forth. So, is the juice worth the squeeze? Well, it sure seems like it. Who wouldn't be happy with another 400,000, 1 million added to your bottom line? But it's possible. The change is really, we want to go from paying too much to reducing costs by 25%. We want to go from missing discounts to getting new discounts, more cash, no audits to new audits and new cash back. High supplier pricing to competitive pricing. We want to go from too many suppliers to an optimized supplier base. And if we do all those things, we're going to have new profitability to reinvest in the business. We can help. StrategicSource has been helping dealers for almost 25 years. We got into it in early 2000. We've saved, we've got to update that chart, over $1 billion for our clients. We've got 150 years of spend experience on staff. We're Minnesota based. We're about 40 employees today, veteran owned. We've got a number of programs from our profit improvement program, which is really the biggest program. But we can do other things too, just spend analysis. We've got a contract tracker we can help you out with, and we've got a digital solution that's just data driven as well. So with that, I don't know, Rachel, if we've got capability for any questions out there, but I'm happy to take them if so.
If anyone has any questions, you can pass them along to me and I will send them on to Doug. Thanks for coming on today, Doug, and sharing this great information. It's very tedious, but you somehow, every time you're on, manage to make it very manageable and break it down into digestible pieces. So thank you. We appreciate you taking the time for that.
Last slide here. If you want the presentation, I know Rachel's going to make that available. You can take a picture of that QR code. We can get that to you. We would be willing to do a free price comp review on a couple of categories for you. You can scan that QR code, and if you want an assessment, a best practice assessment, Scan that code and we'd be happy to help you with that. Chris Austin is our Chief Revenue Officer. You can reach him at 612-386-3898 or Chris C. Austin at StrategicSource.com. I've got a typo in there. Sorry, everybody.
That's okay. You're only human.
So anyway, we appreciate the time and the opportunity, the partnership with AIADA, and thank you again for attending today. Hope this was helpful.
Yep, and like Doug said, you will all be receiving this presentation and recording by the end of this week. To those on the line, join us back here Tuesday, May 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern as Dealer Ops discusses dealership data breaches and the blind spot that most dealerships never see coming. So be on the lookout for promotions on how to register. For more information about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for joining us and have a great day, everyone.